"I'll surrender for a roof tonight," said the Apache woman to the lonely rancher. He was a man shaped by the land he worked, a rugged stretch of Arizona desert that seemed as endless as time itself. His ranch sat on the far edge of a winding dirt road, miles away from the nearest town, isolated from neighbors and distant from civilization. The sun scorched the earth by day, and the nights brought an icy chill that crept into the bones. John had grown used to the extremes of the land, finding comfort in its steady rhythms, yet the solitude sometimes weighed on him more heavily than the heat or cold. Every morning, John would rise before dawn, long before the sun painted the sky with its golden streaks. His routine was simple but unforgiving. He would feed the cattle, mend fences, check the water supply, and ensure that everything was in order before the day's heat became unbearable. Years of labor had made him strong and capable, yet the work was never-ending. Each day brought the same tasks, and each day ended in exhaustion, but John found a strange satisfaction in the predictability of the work. There were no surprises, no betrayals, no disappointment, only the honest struggle of life on the land. Despite his outward calm, John's past was marked by sorrow. He had once had a family, a home filled with laughter and warmth. But tragedy had taken them away, leaving him alone in the vast emptiness of the desert. The loss had hardened him in some ways, making him wary of emotional attachment. Friends and neighbors rarely visited him. Those who did often left quickly, intimidated by his quiet intensity or the roughness of his ways. He had learned to rely on himself, to trust no one but the land and the animals he cared for. John's house reflected his life, simple, sturdy, and functional. It was a modest wooden structure with a single porch that overlooked the sprawling ranch. The interior was sparsely furnished, with a worn wooden table, a few chairs, and a small fireplace that was rarely lit except during the coldest nights. On the walls hung tools of his trade, and shelves held books that he rarely read, mostly old journals and ledgers documenting the life of the ranch. There were no photographs, no reminders of the life he had lost, and he preferred it that way. Memories could be painful, and John had chosen to live in the present day by day, task by task. One evening, after a particularly long day under the blazing sun, John sat on the porch, wiping the sweat from his brow. The cattle had been difficult to herd that day, scattered across the rugged terrain, and a fence had broken in the western pasture, demanding repair. The work had been exhausting, leaving him physically drained but also strangely content. As he sipped water from a tin cup, he watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange, pink, and purple. The desert had a beauty of its own, one that John had grown to appreciate over the years, even if it was a lonely beauty. It was then that he noticed a figure on the distant trail, moving slowly toward the ranch. At first, he thought it might be a traveler or perhaps a lost wanderer. The figure was small and fragile-looking, almost like a shadow moving against the fading light. As the person came closer, John could make out the details. A woman, dressed in worn clothing, carrying nothing but a small bundle. Her hair was dark and tangled, and her face was streaked with dust and exhaustion. She moved with a cautious grace, her steps careful as if every movement might bring danger. John's first instinct was to stay hidden, to observe from a distance. He had encountered strangers before, and in the wild expanses of the desert, trust was never easily given. People could be desperate, dangerous, or unpredictable. Yet there was something different about this woman. She seemed small and fragile, yet there was a quiet strength in her movements, a determination that spoke of survival against great odds. As she drew closer, John saw her glance toward the ranch, her eyes meeting his briefly before she looked away. There was fear there, certainly, but also a plea almost invisible but unmistakable. She approached the porch slowly, hesitating at the edge of the yard as if uncertain whether to continue. The wind carried the faint scent of dust and smoke from distant fires, and John could see the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. She was clearly alone, vulnerable, and seeking shelter. John remained silent, leaning against the railing, his mind racing through possibilities. Should he call out? Should he offer help? The rules of the land were simple: help those in need, but never let your guard down. He could sense that she had been through hardship, but how much? And could she be trusted? The desert was a place where appearances could be deceiving, and survival often depended on caution. Finally, the woman spoke, her voice soft but clear, breaking the silence of the evening. "Please, I need shelter," she said. Her words were simple, almost hesitant, but they carried the weight of someone who had nowhere else to go. John felt a strange stirring in his chest, a mixture of curiosity, concern, and something he hadn't felt in years: empathy. He studied her carefully, noting the dirt on her clothes, the weariness in her posture, and the way she held her bundle close to her chest. It was clear she had been traveling for a long time, and that she had faced challenges he could only imagine. John's hand rested on the railing, and after a long pause he spoke, his voice steady but quiet. "You can stay the night," he said, "but only the night. Tomorrow you'll have to move on." The woman's eyes widened slightly, relief mingled with gratitude. She nodded and took a cautious step forward. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice had a musical quality, soft but strong, carrying the echoes of a life shaped by hardship and resilience. She did not speak of who she was or why she had come, and John did not ask. Words could wait. For now, the important thing was shelter, warmth, and a brief respite from the dangers of the desert. As she stepped onto the porch, John noticed the way she carried herself, the carefulness in her movements, and the quiet dignity that remained despite her obvious fatigue. There was something compelling about her presence, a story written in the lines of her face, the set of her shoulders, and the determination in her eyes. He did not know it yet, but this chance encounter would mark the beginning of a change in his life, one that he had long believed was closed to him forever. That evening, John prepared a simple meal, sharing a modest portion with the woman. They ate in silence at first, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the occasional rustle of the wind through the dry grasses outside. She did not speak much, but her presence filled the small cabin with a quiet energy that was both calming and unsettling. John found himself watching her, noticing details he would never have paid attention to before. The way she tied her hair back, the careful way she placed her hands on the table, the way her eyes reflected the flickering firelight. As night fell and the desert grew dark, John felt a strange mix of emotions. He was wary, of course, for trust was not easily given, but he also felt a sense of connection, fleeting yet undeniable. The loneliness that had defined his life suddenly seemed less absolute, as though the presence of another human being had begun to fill a space he had long thought empty. Outside, the stars appeared in the vast night sky, countless points of light shining down on the desert. John looked up, feeling the weight of solitude but also the faint glimmer of hope that sometimes, even in the harshest places, people could find each other. The woman, whom John would later come to know as Nayeli, settled into a corner of the cabin, her small bundle beside her. She did not ask questions, and John did not offer explanations. There was no need. The night was a shared understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of survival and the fragility of life. In that moment, neither of them spoke of the past or the future. They only existed in the present, two solitary figures finding shelter under the same roof. The storm that had been brewing on the horizon finally reached them, sending gusts of wind and brief flashes of lightning across the desert. Rain began to fall, light at first and then heavier, pounding the roof of the cabin and washing the dusty land outside. John listened to the sound, feeling a rare sense of peace. For once, he was not alone in facing the challenges of the world. Someone else was here, someone who had endured hardship and who, for tonight at least, would share his shelter. As the night deepened, John Fletcher sat back in his chair, watching Naomi drift into a light sleep by the fire. Her presence was a quiet reminder that even in the harshest landscapes, human connection could take root. And though he would not have admitted it aloud, he felt a glimmer of something long forgotten, a fragile hope that life, even in its loneliness, could still offer unexpected encounters that might change everything. The morning after the storm, the desert looked washed and refreshed. The rain had left the earth darker, the dust settled, and a faint scent of wet grass and soil lingered in the air. John Fletcher woke before sunrise, as he always did, stepping out onto the porch to check the cattle. The sky was a soft orange, and the world felt quieter than usual, as if the desert itself were pausing after the storm. Naomi, the woman who had appeared at his doorstep the previous evening, was awake as well. She sat quietly on the edge of the cabin's porch, her small bundle beside her. Her dark hair, damp from the night's rain, hung loosely around her shoulders, and her eyes, still wary, watched John as he moved. She had slept fitfully, her body stiff from exhaustion, but there was a calm in her expression that had not been there when she first arrived. The storm had passed, and the world seemed momentarily safe, giving them both a rare chance to breathe. John had made a simple breakfast, a few eggs and some bread, and he invited Naomi to join him. At first, she hesitated, as if unsure whether it was safe to trust someone she had only met the night before, but hunger won over caution, and she sat down across from him. The two ate in silence at first, the crackling of the fire the only sound between them. John watched her closely, studying her features, the way she held her hands, the careful movements of her fingers, the subtle tension in her posture. She was cautious, but there was also a quiet strength in her that he could not ignore. After a few moments, Naomi spoke, her voice soft but clear. I did not know where else to go," she admitted, her eyes meeting his for the first time since breakfast began. There was no accusation in her tone, only honesty. John nodded slowly, understanding more than she could know. The desert was a harsh place, and for those without shelter or protection it could be unforgiving. "You can stay for now," he said simply. "But you should know this place is quiet and I live alone. I'm not used to company." His words were honest, matter-of-fact, yet there was a subtle invitation in them. He did not offer a warm welcome or speak with kindness that came easily. His voice carried the weight of a man who had lived alone for years, someone who measured words carefully. Naomi nodded, understanding the caution behind his words. "I will not trouble you," she said quietly. Her accent and phrasing suggested she had grown up speaking in a language different from his, a fact that intrigued John. Though she spoke English, there was a musical quality to her speech, a rhythm that reminded him of the distant songs of the desert wind. The morning passed slowly. John tended to his chores, repairing the broken fence from the storm, checking the water troughs, and inspecting the cattle. Naomi followed him at a distance, observing quietly at first. She had grown up in the wilderness, and her eyes missed nothing. The way the wind moved across the hills, the subtle changes in the terrain, the behavior of the animals. Occasionally, she offered advice or assistance, suggesting a better way to secure a fence post or a more efficient method to herd the cattle. John was surprised by her knowledge. She was not just a survivor. She was skilled, resourceful, and intelligent, traits that were rare in a world dominated by harsh physical labor and constant struggle. As the day progressed, the two began to speak more freely. Naomi shared fragments of her past, carefully choosing what to reveal. She spoke of her tribe, the Apache, and the dangers that had forced her to leave. She spoke of her family, of people she had loved and lost, and of the endless journey that had brought her to John's ranch. She did not speak of betrayal or blame, only of survival and the need to find safety. John listened intently, offering few words but giving her the attention that had long been missing from his life. The more he learned about her, the more he realized the enormity of what she had endured. She had traveled for days through the desert, often without enough food or water, avoiding both wild animals and the dangers of men who sought to exploit or harm her. Her journey had been perilous, and yet she had arrived at his doorstep with nothing but courage and determination. John felt a mix of admiration and quiet respect. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, strong, independent, and unbroken by hardship. Despite the distance between them, a sense of connection began to form. It was subtle at first, like the faint warmth of the sun rising over the desert hills, unnoticed until it touches the skin. John found himself watching her with a careful interest, noting the way she moved, the expressions that crossed her face, and the quiet confidence that belied her exhaustion. Nayeli, in turn, seemed to study him as well, noticing the meticulous care he took with the ranch, the quiet way he handled the cattle, and the loneliness that lingered behind his eyes. By late afternoon, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert floor. John and Nayeli had finished the day's work, and the ranch seemed quieter than ever, as if the storm had cleansed the world of noise and distraction. They sat on the porch together, watching the wind ripple through the tall grasses, the cattle grazing peacefully in the distance. For a moment, words were unnecessary. The silence between them was comfortable, a shared acknowledgement of survival and endurance. Then, unexpectedly, Nayeli spoke again. Her voice was low, almost hesitant, but it carried a weight that made John pause. I will do whatever is needed," she said softly, choosing her words carefully. "I need only a roof tonight, a place to rest. I will not be a burden." There was no arrogance in her tone, no demand, only honesty and vulnerability. Her words struck John deeply. She was not asking for charity or pity, only for safety, and there was a dignity in that plea that he could not ignore. John nodded slowly, understanding more than she realized. "You will have shelter," he said, "not as a favor but because it is the right thing to do. Tonight you are safe." His words were simple, yet they carried the weight of a promise, one that he had not made lightly. In that moment, the distance between them seemed smaller, bridged by a mutual recognition of need and trust. As night approached, John prepared a small fire outside, lighting it so that they could sit and eat under the stars. The desert night was cold, and the warmth of the fire was a comfort to both. Nayeli cooked a small meal with the few supplies she had, while John contributed some preserved food from his pantry. They ate together, sharing not only food but stories, laughter, and moments of quiet reflection. The conversation was slow, cautious, and measured, yet there was an unmistakable bond forming between them, a fragile trust that was beginning to take root. The sky darkened, revealing a blanket of stars that stretched endlessly above the desert. John looked up, feeling a rare sense of peace. For the first time in many years, he was not entirely alone. Nayeli's presence was a reminder that even in a harsh and unforgiving world, human connection could emerge unexpectedly. The warmth of the fire mirrored the quiet warmth spreading in his heart, a subtle acknowledgement that his life was no longer entirely solitary. Nayeli, sitting across from him, seemed to sense the change as well. She had arrived at the ranch seeking only shelter, yet she had found something unexpected, someone who was cautious but willing to offer trust, a rare combination in a world full of uncertainty. She realized that perhaps this encounter, which had begun as an act of survival, could evolve into something more, a partnership, a friendship, or even something deeper. The thought brought a small smile to her lips, one that John noticed despite the flickering shadows of the fire. As the night grew deeper, they settled inside the cabin. John prepared a small corner with blankets for Nayeli, while he took his usual spot near the fireplace. The storm from the previous night had passed, leaving only the faint sound of wind whispering through the desert. The quiet was comforting, a stark contrast to the chaos and uncertainty of the world outside. In the safety of the cabin, both John and Nayeli allowed themselves a rare moment of rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities for trust and connection. Before sleep overtook them, Nayeli spoke once more, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you," she said, her eyes reflecting the firelight, "for tonight and for not turning me away." There was a sincerity in her words that touched John in a way he had long forgotten. He nodded, understanding that the simple act of providing shelter had the power to change not only her life but his as well. And so, under the vast desert sky, two strangers, one a lonely rancher, the other a weary Apache woman, found a fragile peace in each other's company. It was a peace built on trust, honesty, and the quiet understanding that sometimes, even in the harshest places, human kindness could prevail. That night marked the beginning of a story neither of them could have predicted, one that would challenge them, shape them, and ultimately bring them together in ways neither could have imagined. The next morning, the desert seemed quieter than ever. A thin layer of fog clung to the distant hills, and the world felt softer after the storm. John Fletcher woke early, as he always did, and prepared to tend to the ranch. The routine of the land was familiar and comforting, checking the cattle, repairing fences, and making sure the water troughs were full. Yet for the first time in many years, there was another presence that made the routine feel different, someone who shared the same space, someone who mattered. Nayeli stirred as the sun rose, stepping out onto the porch with her small bundle of belongings. She moved with the careful precision of someone accustomed to surviving in the wild. Every motion seemed deliberate, as if each step might carry consequences. Yet there was a grace to her movements, a quiet strength that John could not help but notice. She did not speak immediately, instead watching John as he worked, her eyes following his hands as they mended a fence post and checked the cattle. After a while, she approached him cautiously. "May I help?" she asked. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, but there was an underlying confidence. John paused, studying her for a moment. He had seen her observe yesterday, noticed the way she understood the land and the animals. She was not just a stranger in need, she was capable, skilled, and aware. "All right," John said finally, "but be careful. These fences can be tricky." He handed her a hammer and showed her where a post had splintered during the storm. Nayeli's hands were steady and precise. She worked with care, tightening nails and aligning the wood with accuracy. John watched, impressed by her skill. In many ways, she was a natural, someone who had learned to survive and adapt through necessity. As the morning progressed, they worked side by side, and conversation began to flow more freely. Nayeli told him more about her life, not just the hardships but also the small joys she remembered from her tribe, songs, dances, and traditions that celebrated life even in difficult times. John listened, intrigued by her stories. He had grown up with a different life, one of hard labor and isolation, and her tales seemed almost magical in comparison. There was a rhythm and beauty to her words that he could not ignore, a reminder that life could hold moments of wonder even amidst struggle. John shared a little of his own past, careful not to dwell too long on the pain and loss he had endured. He spoke of the ranch, of the challenges of living in the desert, and of the quiet satisfaction that came from working with the land. Nayeli listened intently, asking questions and offering insights that sometimes surprised him. She had a perspective shaped by survival and connection to nature, and her observations often revealed solutions he had never considered. By midday, the sun was high in the sky, casting sharp shadows across the desert floor. They paused for a break, sitting under the shade of a lone mesquite tree. Nayeli drank water from a small flask she had carried, and John handed her some bread. The air was dry and hot, but there was a sense of camaraderie between them that made the labor less exhausting. For the first time, John realized that he did not mind the company. Naomi's presence was not a burden, it was a source of energy, a reminder that work could be shared and life could be more than mere survival. After the break, they returned to the ranch tasks. Naomi suggested ways to improve the water trough, showing John how to prevent leaks and ensure the cattle had enough to drink. He followed her advice, surprised by the effectiveness of her methods. Slowly, a pattern emerged. John provided the labor, the tools, and his knowledge of the ranch, while Naomi contributed her insight, her resourcefulness, and her understanding of living with the land. Together, they worked as a team, and the efficiency of their collaboration surprised even John. During a pause in their work, Naomi spoke again, her voice quiet but thoughtful. "I have learned many things from the desert," she said. "It teaches patience, observation, and respect. You cannot fight it, you must work with it, and sometimes you must trust." Her eyes met his, and John felt the weight of her words. Trust had been scarce in his life, yet here was a woman who understood its value, someone who had lived it in every choice she had made to survive. As the afternoon waned, a small challenge arose that tested their growing connection. A calf had wandered too far from the herd, stuck near a rocky incline. John tried to coax it back, but it became frightened and bolted in the opposite direction. Naomi acted quickly, her knowledge of animal behavior evident. She guided John, showing him the safest path and the best way to approach the calf without frightening it further. Together, they managed to lead the animal back to the herd, a success that left both of them breathing heavily but smiling. "That was impressive," John said, his tone soft but genuine. "I would have been stuck out there for hours without your help." Naomi shrugged modestly. "I've had to learn quickly," she replied. "Sometimes mistakes can be very costly. You learn or you do not survive." The honesty in her words resonated with John. He had learned much the same lesson in his years on the ranch, yet hearing it from someone else reminded him that survival was a shared experience, one that could build bonds between people. As evening approached, the sky turned golden with the setting sun. The temperature cooled, and a gentle breeze moved through the tall grasses. John and Naomi returned to the cabin, tired but satisfied with the day's accomplishments. Inside, they prepared a modest dinner together. Naomi cooked some beans over the fire, and John added a few vegetables from his pantry. They ate slowly, savoring the food and the quiet comfort of companionship. During dinner, they talked about small, ordinary things, the weather, the cattle, and the routine of ranch life. It was not grand conversation, but it was meaningful. In these small exchanges, a sense of trust and familiarity began to take shape. John realized that he had begun to enjoy her company in ways he had not expected. Naomi, too, felt a growing respect for the man who had offered her shelter without judgment, a man whose quiet strength and integrity were evident in every action. Later that night, as the stars appeared over the desert, John and Naomi sat outside by the fire. The world was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of wind through the grass. They shared stories of their childhoods, their hopes, and their fears. Naomi spoke of her tribe, the songs and traditions she remembered, and the dreams she once held. John listened, sharing some of his own memories, careful to keep the conversation balanced between lightness and honesty. The connection between them deepened, not through grand gestures, but through shared experience and mutual respect. The desert, harsh and unforgiving, had brought them together in a way that neither could have anticipated. They had survived the storm, faced challenges together, and found in each other a source of strength. The trust that began as necessity had begun to transform into something more profound, a quiet bond built on understanding and shared resilience. Before sleep claimed them, Naomi spoke softly, almost to herself. "I did not think I would find anyone out here," she said, "but somehow I feel safe, even for a little while." John, listening, felt a warmth he had not experienced in years. He did not offer empty words or promises, only a simple acknowledgement. You are safe here. For now, that is enough. And so, in the quiet desert night, two strangers, one a solitary rancher, the other a weary Apache woman, began to form a fragile but growing trust. It was a trust built on shared work, small victories, and honest conversation. The storm outside had passed, but the challenges of life were far from over. Yet, for the first time in a long while, both John and Nayeli felt a sense of possibility, a faint glimmer of hope that the world could be less lonely when faced together. The night ended with the fire burning low, the stars above silent witnesses to a bond beginning to take shape. John watched Nayeli settle into a corner of the cabin, her eyes closing in rest, and he felt a quiet sense of gratitude. In the vast, unforgiving desert, two lives had intersected in a moment of necessity, and slowly, carefully, a connection was growing, a connection that would shape both of their lives in ways they could not yet imagine. The desert seemed to change with every passing day. The scorching heat of midday softened into a more bearable warmth, the wind shifting from harsh gusts to gentle breezes that carried the scent of sagebrush and earth. For John Fletcher, life on the ranch remained as demanding as ever. Fences needed repairing, cattle had to be checked, and water supplies required constant attention. Yet, with Nayeli's presence, the long, lonely hours began to feel lighter. She had become a companion in more ways than one, someone who shared the work, the burdens, and the quiet moments that filled the spaces between tasks. The morning began with the routine inspection of the cattle. John moved among the herd, his eyes scanning for signs of illness or injury. Nayeli followed closely, her steps silent but deliberate. She had learned quickly how to read the animals, noticing subtle behaviors that even John sometimes missed. "That one over there," she said softly, pointing to a young calf that seemed sluggish. "Check its hooves. Something might be wrong." John knelt to examine the animal and found a small thorn embedded in its hoof. Carefully, he removed it, thanking Nayeli for her sharp observation. Their work together was no longer just necessity. It had become collaboration. John found himself relying on her advice and insight in ways he had never imagined. Nayeli, for her part, appreciated John's steady guidance and the safety of the ranch. She had faced dangers on her journey that had taught her to survive alone, but the reliability of John's presence offered her a rare sense of stability. There was a quiet trust developing between them, built not on words alone but on actions and shared experience. By midday, the sun blazed overhead, and they paused to rest in the shade of the cabin. Nayeli drank water slowly, savoring each sip, while John took a moment to wipe the sweat from his brow. They ate a simple meal, sharing bread, cheese, and dried fruit. Conversation was easy, flowing naturally from one topic to another. Nayeli told John more about the traditions of her people, about how the Apache lived in harmony with the land, moving with the seasons and respecting the creatures around them. John listened intently, intrigued by her perspective. He had always worked the land with practicality in mind, but her stories brought a deeper appreciation for its beauty and balance. After lunch, they faced the first real challenge of the day. A section of the northern fence had collapsed during the recent storm, leaving the cattle at risk of wandering into dangerous terrain. John sighed, knowing the work would be difficult, and Nayeli stepped forward without hesitation. "We can do this together," she said firmly. "If we work as a team, it will go faster." Her confidence was contagious, and John felt a spark of energy he had not experienced in years. They worked side by side, lifting heavy posts, hammering nails, and reinforcing the structure. The sun beat down relentlessly, and sweat soaked their clothing, but they did not pause for long. There was a rhythm to their labor, a silent communication that grew with each movement. John would hand Nayeli tools and she would position the wood. She would suggest adjustments and he would follow. Words were minimal, but understanding flowed freely between them. As the afternoon wore on, a small crisis emerged. One of the older cattle had wandered too close to a steep ravine. John moved quickly, calling to the animal and guiding it back to safer ground, but it panicked, slipping and nearly falling. Naomi reacted immediately, positioning herself to block the animal's path and calm it with gentle movements. Together, they managed to prevent disaster, their combined efforts saving the animal from injury. Breathing heavily, John looked at Naomi with newfound respect. "You were amazing," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. Naomi smiled faintly, shrugging modestly. "I have had to be quick before," she replied. "Experience teaches you how to act when there is no time to think." Her honesty was humbling, and John felt a deep sense of appreciation for her presence. She was not just helping him, she was proving that strength and skill could come from places he had not expected. By evening, the work was done and the ranch had been restored to order. The sun dipped low in the sky, painting the desert with shades of gold and crimson. John and Naomi sat on the porch, exhausted but content, watching the cattle settle into the pastures. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the unspoken understanding that they had accomplished something together. For John, the day had been physically demanding, but emotionally, it had been rewarding in ways he had not anticipated. Naomi's presence had transformed the routine into shared achievement. As night fell, they prepared a simple dinner over the fire. Naomi cooked while John tended to the cabin, checking that the animals were safe and the doors were secure. The warmth of the fire illuminated their faces, highlighting the weariness but also the satisfaction that came from a day well spent. Conversation flowed easily now, no longer hesitant or cautious. They spoke of hopes and dreams, of challenges faced and overcome, and of the moments that had shaped them both. Naomi, for the first time, shared more personal stories. She spoke of the friends and family she had lost, of moments of fear and courage, and of the long journey that had brought her to the ranch. John listened without interruption, absorbing every word, recognizing the resilience and bravery she had shown. He realized that the woman before him was not just a survivor. She was a person of strength, wisdom, and quiet determination. John, in turn, opened up about his past, sharing memories he had long kept buried. He spoke of his family, of loss, and of the long years of solitude that had shaped his life. Naomi listened attentively, offering neither judgment nor pity, only understanding. Her presence allowed him to speak freely, to acknowledge emotions he had hidden for decades. In that moment, trust deepened between them, moving beyond necessity into genuine connection. The desert night was calm, the stars scattered across the sky like tiny diamonds. John and Naomi sat by the fire, the crackle of flames providing a steady rhythm to their conversation. They spoke of the land, of survival, and of the bond that had begun to form between them. There was a comfort in their shared silence, a recognition that they had found something rare, a companion who understood the struggles and joys of life in the desert. As the hours passed, John felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. Naomi's presence was a reminder that life could hold moments of connection, even in the harshest environments. She had come seeking shelter for the night, but she had stayed for the days, proving that companionship could emerge from the most unexpected circumstances. Naomi, too, felt a shift within herself. She had traveled for so long, always wary, always moving to survive. Yet in the quiet of the desert night, she felt safe for the first time in months. John had not only offered her shelter, but had also shown respect and kindness without expectation. Their bond, forged through shared labor and understanding, was becoming a source of strength for both. Before sleep, they prepared the cabin for the night. John checked the doors and windows, while Naomi arranged blankets and supplies in her corner. The routine was simple but comforting, a reflection of the life they were beginning to share. As they settled down, Naomi spoke softly, almost to herself. "I never imagined finding someone I could trust," she said. "Even for a little while." John, listening, offered a quiet affirmation. "Trust can grow slowly," he replied, "but it can grow if you allow it." The night ended with the fire burning low and the desert quiet around them. John watched Nayeli drift into sleep, feeling a warmth in his chest he had long forgotten. The bond between them had strengthened through shared work, challenges, and conversation. It was a fragile bond, yet it was real, built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. Outside, the wind whispered through the grasses, and the stars shone brightly over the desert. John Fletcher and Nayeli, two individuals who had begun as strangers, were now companions in a harsh and unpredictable world. They had faced challenges together, learned to rely on each other, and discovered that even in the most difficult circumstances, connection could take root. And so, as the night embraced the desert, both felt a quiet anticipation for the days to come. They knew that life on the ranch would continue to be demanding, but they also knew that together, they could face whatever challenges arose. The bond they had forged in the heat of labor and the quiet moments of reflection was becoming unbreakable, a foundation for the trust and companionship that would shape their future. The next morning, the desert greeted John Fletcher and Nayeli with a gentle light, the sun rising slowly over the horizon, painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber. The world seemed calm, almost still, yet it was alive with subtle movements, the rustling of grasses, the distant call of a hawk, and the faint breeze carrying the scent of earth and wildflowers. For the first time in many years, John felt a deep sense of contentment, a feeling that the vast, lonely land was no longer entirely empty. Nayeli, too, sensed a shift within herself. The ranch, the rancher, and the quiet companionship they had formed were becoming something permanent in her heart. That morning, their routine began as usual. John checked the water troughs, inspected the fences, and moved among the cattle, while Nayeli assisted him, offering her observations and skills. Their work flowed naturally, each understanding the other's methods without unnecessary words. There was a silent harmony in their movements, a recognition that they were stronger together than alone. Over the weeks that had passed, their bond had deepened, moving beyond mere trust into a quiet interdependence that neither had expected. After completing the morning chores, they sat on the porch for a brief rest. Nayeli looked out at the horizon, her dark eyes reflecting the brightness of the desert. She spoke softly, almost as if talking to herself, yet John heard every word. "I never thought I would find a place to call home," she said. "A place where I am safe, where I am not constantly on guard." John nodded, understanding the depth of her words. He had once believed that solitude was his only option, that the harshness of life demanded distance from others. Yet, here was someone who had shown him that companionship could exist even in the most unexpected circumstances. They spoke at length that morning, sharing memories of the past and hopes for the future. Nayeli told John about the small joys she remembered from her tribe, songs sung around a fire, dances performed during the changing seasons, and the simple laughter of children playing under the sun. John shared stories of his own past, his life on the ranch, and the years of solitude that had shaped him. The conversation flowed freely, without hesitation or fear, a testament to the trust that had grown between them. As the day progressed, they faced another challenge. A section of the pasture fence had weakened, and several cattle had wandered closer to a rocky cliff. John and Nayeli moved quickly, their teamwork seamless. Nayeli guided the animals with gentle hands and careful movements, while John secured the fence, his strength and experience complementing her skill and intuition. The task was difficult, and the sun bore down relentlessly, but they persevered, their shared effort turning a potential disaster into a success. By late afternoon, the ranch was in order, and the sun began to dip toward the horizon. The sky glowed with brilliant shades of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the desert. John and Nayeli sat on the porch, exhausted but satisfied. The shared labor had not only maintained the ranch, but had also solidified the bond between them. There was a sense of accomplishment, a recognition that they had created something together: safety, order, and even a small measure of beauty in a harsh land. As evening fell, they prepared a modest meal together. Nayeli cooked beans and vegetables over the fire, while John brought out fresh bread and water. The meal was simple, yet there was a warmth in the act of preparing and sharing food. It was more than sustenance. It was a symbol of their growing partnership, a ritual that reinforced the connection that had been forming over weeks of shared work and conversation. After dinner, they sat outside, the night sky stretching endlessly above them. Stars sparkled in the darkness, reflected faintly in the eyes of the two companions. The desert was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of wind and the distant sound of an owl. In that stillness, John felt a rare sense of peace. Nayeli's presence had brought life and warmth to the ranch, and he realized that he had come to rely on her companionship in ways he had never expected. Nayeli, too, felt the depth of their connection. She had arrived at the ranch seeking only shelter for the night, a temporary reprieve from the dangers of the desert. Yet over the weeks, she had found something far more valuable: a sense of belonging, a place where she could rest without fear, and a companion who understood and respected her. The trust that had begun with necessity had grown into genuine friendship and care, a bond neither had anticipated but both cherished. As they sat together, John spoke quietly, choosing his words carefully. "You don't have to leave tomorrow," he said. "You can stay as long as you want. The ranch, it is not just mine anymore. It is ours now if you wish it." Nayeli looked at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight, and a gentle smile spread across her face. For the first time in months, perhaps years, she felt a true sense of hope. The life she had been seeking, a place of safety, companionship, and stability, was here. They spent the evening in quiet conversation, sharing dreams for the future. Nayeli spoke of planting a small garden, tending the land, and learning more about the cattle and ranch life. John spoke of improvements he had long considered but had never attempted alone. The conversation was filled with plans, small and realistic, yet it carried a sense of excitement and possibility. Together, they imagined a life where the harshness of the desert was tempered by the warmth of companionship and shared effort. As night deepened, they prepared the cabin for sleep. John checked the doors and windows, ensuring the animals were secure, while Nayeli arranged blankets and supplies in her corner. The routine was simple but comforting, a reflection of the life they were beginning to share. The fire burned low, casting flickering shadows across the walls, and the silence was filled with the quiet assurance of trust and understanding. Before settling down, Nayeli spoke softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I came here needing shelter for the night," she said. "But I have found something much more, something I did not expect." John listened, understanding the depth of her words. "And what is that?" he asked gently. Nayeli's eyes met his and she smiled. "A place where I belong, and someone I can trust. Someone I can count on." The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of months of struggle, survival, and growing connection. John felt a warmth in his chest that he had not known in years. He had long believed that solitude was his only path, that the harshness of life required distance from others. Yet Nayeli's presence had changed that, teaching him that companionship and trust could exist even in the most unlikely circumstances. The bond they had formed was not merely a matter of convenience or necessity. It was a choice, built on shared effort, mutual respect, and genuine care. The night passed quietly, the desert outside calm and still. Both John and Nayeli slept deeply, resting in the security of the cabin and the knowledge that they were no longer alone. In the morning, the sun rose again, casting a warm light over the ranch, and with it came the promise of a new beginning. The challenges of life would continue, as they always had, but now they faced them together, their bond a source of strength and hope. In the days that followed, their routine continued, but it was enriched by the connection they had forged. Work on the ranch was shared, conversation flowed easily, and moments of quiet reflection provided comfort and understanding. They learned from each other, adapted to each other's strengths, and supported each other in ways that neither had anticipated. The desert, once a symbol of isolation and harshness, had become a place of growth, companionship, and resilience. As weeks turned into months, John and Nayeli found a rhythm that suited them both. They cared for the cattle, repaired fences, tended to the land, and shared quiet evenings by the fire. The trust and connection between them deepened, forming the foundation for a lasting partnership. They discovered that even in the most challenging circumstances, human kindness, understanding, and companionship could transform life, offering hope and stability where once there had been only loneliness and uncertainty. One evening, as the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold, Nayeli turned to John. "I will stay," she said softly, her voice steady. "Not because I need shelter, but because I want to. Because this is home now." John nodded, feeling a sense of fulfillment that words could not capture. He had found not only a companion but a friend, someone whose presence brought warmth, trust, and hope into his life. And so, under the vast desert sky, the lonely rancher and the weary Apache woman had found each other. Their lives, once defined by isolation and survival, were now enriched by connection, trust, and shared purpose. They had faced challenges together, learned to rely on one another, and discovered that even in the harshest places, life could hold moments of hope, companionship, and new beginnings. In the quiet of the night, as the stars sparkled above the desert, John Fletcher and Nayeli sat together on the porch, watching the world around them. The ranch was peaceful, the animals settled, and the wind carried the faint scent of sage and earth. They had found not only shelter and safety, but also trust, friendship, and the possibility of a future shared together. It was a new beginning, one built on resilience, understanding, and the quiet power of human connection, a beginning that neither of them had expected but both had come to cherish.